Okay, so it's been about 4 months now since I've had an opportunity to put one of these up. I don't intend to go that long again. I could go into all the ghastly, horrible details of everything that's been going on with me for the past, since July. It seemed like everything went to hell. I mean, I got the COVID thing going on, and then I got sick again with something else, and then job loss happened, and well, it would sound like a really good classic country song if I was to describe everything that's been going on with me. But I am back, and I don't intend to ever go that long again without putting up videos online and putting up some material online. And I've had several topics that have been floating around in my head for quite some time, but I haven't. I didn't have any one particular one focused on this morning, but I happened to pull up this article that I had stumbled across the other day. It's an older article. It's from the New York Times, and it was written in 2019, and it's from a decidedly feminist perspective. I don't think the lady would mind me saying that. She wrote a book called, let me click over here again with it, Quit Like a Woman. Her name is Holly Whitaker. I agree with some of the things she puts forth in the article, but then there's other things that I would have to disagree with. And there's a couple of other things I'd like to point out with it. So rather than ramble on about other things, I'll just jump right into it. The subheading for the article, she says, women who drink too much need help, but we don't need to give up our power. Well, I would totally agree with her on that, but I would also have to add that nobody needs to ever give up their power when it comes to quitting drinking. Empowerment, to me, is the absolute solution to the whole entire thing. There was a thought that crossed my mind the other day. There's this part in their AA literature when where he talks about alcoholics are an undisciplined lot and all this other thing. Well, it would seem like the solution then, if you're undisciplined, or if, let's just say, the solution is a lack of self-control, then the solution would be self-control and discipline, not being helpless and dependent upon meetings and saying that you're completely, totally unable to ever do anything positive in your life whatsoever without the help of AA. I mean, that's like saying you're helpless and the solution is to be even more helpless. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. But I agree with their opening statement about people who drink too much need power. They don't need lack of power. What is that crap in there? In one of those chapters, lack of power, that's our dilemma. No, if lack of power is your dilemma, then you need power. Anyway, she goes on to say, I got sober in 2013. Took me about 6 months to transition from throwing back a few bottles of wine or pints of cheap whiskey a night to total abstinence. Well, I can certainly relate to that. I had to taper myself off alcohol. I was alcohol dependent. I was one of those low bottom drunks, as they call them in AA. Even though I try to purge all the vocabulary of AA from my own speaking, like words even like recovery bother me. I still haven't found an alternative for the word spirituality, that describes my own ideas or metaphysical beliefs or whatever you want to call them. But there's just something about that word that still leaves a sour taste in my mouth, and I just can't use it. But she goes on to say, I didn't go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't work the steps. And most important, I wasn't required to enumerate my character defects and work to eliminate them or buy into the idea that an outsized ego and lack of humility were the causes of my need to numb myself with alcohol. Well, she was several steps ahead of me there. I remember when I got to AA, at the time I got to AA, I had no idea what the hell I was getting into. The only thing that I knew was that was the marketed solution. That was the go-to. This was in the days before, like I said, you had a lot of, the internet, and you had forums like, this, or you had social media where people could tweet their, concerns and issues and all those other things. I mean, I just knew that from what I had been told, AA was the solution, but I do remember having some misgivings when I would hear all these weird phrases, and I'd hear some of this kind of thought-stopping cliches and a lot of other things about it. But I actually was dumb enough to go and do all the steps, which I don't recommend you do, because I regret some of the things I shared with people that ended up getting spread around and even got twisted and distorted into lies later on. But to go on with what she's talking about here, my eschewing the status quo by refusing to use the program scared my loved ones, signaling to them that I wasn't taking my recovery seriously. I wasn't surprised. Participation in AA is not the only effective way to stop drinking, but we've been trained to believe that refuting or even questioning it means you're in denial. I can't tell you that how many people that I've talked to online, and myself included, have experienced that very same thing. People who don't, from family members, from friends, from everyone. I mean, if you say that you don't agree with what you're hearing in AA, somehow or the other it automatically translates to, oh, you just want to drink, you just want to get drunk. Or like, some, the more toxic members of my household that I no longer have any contact with, when I had said I wasn't going to go to meetings daily any longer, and I've been going to meetings daily for like several years at this point, they acted like that I had committed some blasphemous act, some horrifying thing that was going to send me back down a spiral of drunkenness. It never seemed to occur to them that I was relapsing the whole time I was in AA. I mean, I'd get red chips and blue chips and 6 months here, 5 months there. But for some reason, they seemed to think that I needed to be in meetings daily, even though they weren't helping. I mean, and what was weird is, I guess, there's no defensible position I can say on this. I was so brainwashed that I just kept going. I don't know why it never occurred to me to just hop off this crazy train, to quote Ozzy Osbourne. And then she goes on to say, the truth is AA may be the foundation of global recovery, but it wasn't made with everyone in mind. It's not the foundation of global recovery. It's just pulled a good scam on the public into believing it's the foundation of global recovery. It's created quite a good monopoly and hegemony with the billion-dollar-a-year treatment industry that I've talked about, and infiltrating itself into the public consciousness due to the fact that there's so many celebrities who endorse it, there's so many movie writers who endorse it, there's so many news articles and publications that are very friendly to it. It became kind of a monolith that no one dared say anything bad about. And I think those times have changed. And there's another article I'm going to make a video about later on. It says AA no longer has the market on recovery. But she says AA was a miracle. Well, I skipped something. It's a framework created in the 1930s by upper middle class white Protestant men to help people like them overcome addiction. Its founders believed the root of alcoholism was a mammoth ego resulting from an entitled sense of unquestioned authority. Now, she's right there. The early AA people wouldn't have wanted people like me around at all, because they didn't want bums, they didn't want drunks that were low bottom, on the very on the very lower echelons of society. They didn't want people who had drug addictions. They didn't want, there's a certain part in their stupid literature where they talk about a strange alcoholic because he, and of course they throw out this horseshit line about what would the father do, and that's how they adopted and changed and all a bunch of bullshit. But now, to be perfectly honest, where she's a little off base here is the original group that AA ripped off. Bill and Bob were members of it. Was the Oxford group, and the Oxford group was a bit like I guess you could say modern day Scientology in the fact that they liked the rich. I mean, it wasn't so much for the fact that it was designed for so-called upper echelon or upper class type people. It was just they liked the rich. They liked their big bucks coming in. I mean, Frank Buckman who was the original Oxford group leader and everything, he didn't like going to universities unless he got paid exorbitant amounts of money. And unless he got exorbitant amounts of donations, well, you can't really get that from the poorer people or the lower classes. But she is right in one way because, yeah, early AA was a bunch of old stuffed shirt businessmen types, not the type of guys that were blue-collar, working class, like me and so many others that are in the program today. In fact, I've had a couple of subscribers leave comments about this before, that I should do a video talking about that this was kind of a rich man's exclusive club. But it wasn't necessarily a godsend for them or a life-saving type thing. I mean, Bill and Bob were a couple of predatory, creepy dudes. And as far as I know, according to everything I've looked up about AA, it's always been a playground for predators, and it's always been a playground for people to prey on the less fortunate. Bill W. did it his whole entire life. I mean, I did videos on that before, but we'll go on with the article. AA was a miracle for those men who until then had almost nowhere to turn for help. Going to disagree. It was radical in that it was free and it was fueled by an ethos of service. Got to disagree, I'll point it out. But it grew out of a fundamental Christian organization, the Oxford Group. Okay, she's right. And as a result, it's girded by the same belief system that asserts Eve grew from Adam's rib. Now, I do know what she's talking about here in one way, but it was never a miracle and it was never a godsend. Bill W. was always about making money. There was no... I used to hear this story repeated all the time in AA, that there was the original 100 members, and there was the first female members and all this other stuff. There never was an original 100 members. There never was this miraculous program where everybody recovered. That was the reason why Bill pulled a lot of the stories from the first edition in the second edition and altered a lot of other things. One thing, he didn't want to pay anybody the royalties he promised them. From another thing, half of those people had gone back to drinking. Even the guy that came to see Bill, they used to talk about this like it was such a sacred part of the literature in AA meetings about Ebby coming to see Bill. Well, I mean, Ebby never really quite sobered up. So it was never a godsend. It was never a miracle. She's right that it does come from a Protestant fundamentalist Christian organization, which was the Oxford Group. She may include it later on here, but they were also a group that supported the Axis powers during World War II and believed that the world should be run by a dictatorship of God control. So it was never really about helping people. It was never about empowering people. It was about a bunch of elitists that looked upon everybody else as being less than, kind of like the old-timers do today in AA, And she goes on to say, participants are expected to accept the tenets of AA without question, and there's a common refrain that the program works if you work it. She's right. In other words, don't ask questions, and any failure is your own fault. Well, she's dead. She's 100% right there. The 12 steps include things like admitting powerlessness, turning one's will over to God, cataloging defects of character, asking God to remove those defects and making amends for any wrongdoing. And it's all a bunch of bullshit. I've never seen anybody, these old-timers or these people that like to parrot all this stuff, I never saw them practicing any of that garbage, even though that garbage is not helpful, by the way, in the least bit. But mainly 99% of what AA was about was keeping up appearances. It was all about saying cool shit in the meeting so that you could probably exploit your sponsees and and prey on newcomers. I mean, but it was never about doing any of that stuff. But those tenants, yeah, they're idiotic. And yeah, you can't question them. And she's correct in also saying that if you fail at any time or you relapse at any time, it's all your fault. That was one of the first things that gave me a lot of doubt about AA. I mean, when you're doing well, AA gets all the credit. When you fall off the wagon, that's all your fault. Never did understand that. Or you're powerless over alcohol, but you chose to go back out and drink. Little contradictory there, wouldn't you agree? Then she goes on to say, but today's, well, let me see. This program, which was designed to break down white male privilege, made sense for its original members. It reminded them they were not God and encouraged them to humble themselves, to admit their weaknesses, to shut up and listen. Perhaps these were much needed messages when it came to the program's original intended audience. Once again, gotta disagree. It didn't ever help anybody. It was never designed for the so-called, for the privileged of society to be humble in any kind of way, shape, form, or fashion. All you got to do is go to an AA meeting today and take a look at all the old-timers and take a look at all the hierarchy that runs the meetings. Do any of those people practice humility? Do any of those people actually, are they humble? Are they, do they really think they're not God? Do they act like that they're absent of ego? I mean, they're the most egotistical, arrogant, closed-minded individuals that believe their opinion matters above everybody else's. And a lot of them, I think, go to meetings because it's the only place that they can go to where everybody has to be quiet and listen to them preach. I mean, it never worked in terms of helping anybody. It was never designed for that. It was designed originally for Bill W. to make a whole lot of money off of and to push a bunch of phony statistics, like, you know, him pushing this in one of the first editions saying thousands and thousands of people had recovered as a result of this book when the book hadn't even been out that very long. It was a con game all along. It was like Scientology. You know, you want to make $1 million, you start a religion. I remember writer Harlan Ellison even talking about being there when sci-fi writer L. Ron Hubbard made that up. Okay. She goes on to say, but today's women don't need to be broken down and told to be quiet. Well, I agree. We need the opposite. I worry that any program that tells us to renounce power that we never had poses the threat of making us sicker. Got to agree with that, but I would also have to say anybody saying that they're powerless is a bad thing. I think empowerment is the only solution to trying to overcome your addiction. I never got any relief or any feelings of self-esteem out of believing I was powerless and diseased and immoral and flawed, and that these old-timers who were utter shit were telling me what to do with the rest of my life. That was very detrimental. It was no wonder I kept drinking the whole time I was in AA. It's funny, since leaving AA, I hadn't been drinking. That's one thing that the AA people, when you argue with them online, they never want to address. They, you know, couldn't get sober in AA, left AA and actually got sober. Explain that. They'll either say you weren't a real alcoholic to begin with, which is funny considering how many emergency rooms and jails and all the other bullshit that comes with it I went through, or they'll just say you're a dry drunk and you're going to drink again and die soon. So it's they got an answer for everything, like most religious cults do. She goes on to say, when I entered recovery, I didn't need to do a search and inventory to catalog all my character defects. She's right. They've been played back to me my entire life by almost everyone around me. God, I can certainly relate to what she's talking about there. Family is great about reminding you of every wrong you've ever done and every mistake you've ever done, but of course, they're above reproach. It's one of the double standards I've noticed in society, and I think in part it's done because of the fact that the AA program is so ingrained in everybody's consciousness and this idea of tough love and everything. If you're a drinker, you can be treated like shit, you know, and you're not supposed to ever talk back about it. And AA kind of enforces that. You know, you have to eat shit the rest of your life from all the sober people in the world. And then I'm going to skip a little bit here because she just reiterates what what I agree with already. Submitting, being powerless, giving up, and all that other kind of crap is the last thing you need. The antidote to a drinking problem is learning it's safe to trust yourself, developing a sense of confidence, and rejecting humility that people are conditioned to embrace. She says women are conditioned to embrace. I would have to agree with her. But I also turned a critical eye on the society that helped me, made me sick in the first place. Now, where I have to disagree with her here is she says, to be sure, AA works for many people, including many women, and has saved millions of lives. It seems sad to me that every time somebody wants to criticize AA in the mainstream, that they almost have to throw in that disclaimer. In fact, I've seen a couple of anti-AA videos out there on YouTube where they'll say something like, you know, I don't have anything against AA. I mean, it's helped millions of people. No, it never has helped millions of people. It never has. It never even has had millions and millions of members, okay? But that is such a... That's such an ingrained line. It's almost like a meme in our culture that everybody will parrot. I mean, you can actually ask, I guarantee you, you pull some guy in off the street and you say to him, does AA work? And he'll say, well, there's no doubt it's helped millions of people. I mean, it's like one of those things that we're just conditioned to say. But it never helped millions of people. It's never helped anybody. I mean, now here's the thing that really freaks people out when I say it never helped anybody, because they will call their quitting drinking a miracle, right? They'll say the age of miracles is still upon us. But then they'll say it only works if you want it to work. Okay, if it only works if you want it to work, then it can't be a miracle, okay? A miracle is something happening that defies all rational explanation. Like if I don't have an arm, okay, and I go to bed one night and I wake up the next morning and I got a brand new arm, that's a freaking miracle, okay? But quitting drinking because you want to, that's not a miracle. So the only thing that these people are doing that claim that AA saved their life, the only thing they're doing is they quit drinking and they decided to give AA all the credit. And unfortunately, they have decided that everybody else who needs to quit drinking must do AA, and if they can't quit drinking through AA, it's all their fault. But there's nothing miraculous about that, and there's nothing about that that's really helpful. Okay, the people who quit drinking in AA are the same as the people like me who quit drinking outside of AA. We quit drinking because we wanted to quit drinking. I mean, that's it. So it hasn't helped anybody. It's never saved anybody. And there's not much else listed here on the article outside of there's a few political points she makes, which I don't disagree with her when she says that, you know, there's a fast-growing demographic of women who are dependent on alcohol, which means they're on their way to becoming a majority of participants in recovery programs. There's no question they need help, but they don't need to give up their power. I agree with her on that, but I would like to, if I was going to add anything to what she has to say there, I would also like to add that the AA rooms are a haven for sex predators. They're a haven for people who prey on the very women she's talking about. So the inherent dangers of AA is kind of glossed over here a little bit, in my opinion, because she says it helps millions of people, including women. Yes, that may... You know, you're saying it's helped millions of people, including women, but you need to really talk about the fact that 13-stepping is a thing. You need to talk about the fact that you have rapists, okay, and sexual abusers who are old-timers in AA and trusted servants who sit in those meetings and use their position of authority, their badges, to abuse and mistreat both women and men. And you need to also talk about the fact that it's not a safe place at all to be. It's not, when you walk into an AA meeting, you're literally a fish swimming in a shark full of tank. I mean, a tank full of sharks. I had what they call a spoonerism there. I got it backwards. My tang got all tangled up. Anyway, it's great to be back after 4 months, and I appreciate all the comments I've been getting from everybody, the messages of support, the fact that people have continued commenting on the channel and growing the channel, and the new subscribers I've gained and all that other kind of stuff. And hopefully I'll have another one out by next week, because I got a couple of more articles I need to cover, and then there's a couple of more things I want to talk about. So I promise, unless something terrible happens, like a plane falls on me right at this very moment, I will not be gone from YouTube for 4 months again. And I will see all of you soon. And you can stay sober without the steps, and you don't need sponsors. Later.